Please welcome to the stage COO of Shopify, Harley Finkelstein.
Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, great. Just by show of hands, how many in the room are familiar with Shopify? Wow, that's humbling and amazing. So let me start by telling you a bit of a story, my story. When I was 13 years old, the only thing in the entire world that I wanted to do was be a DJ. That was it. It was everything for me. I loved watching DJs at parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs, capturing the crowd's attention, getting everyone so energized. And I really wanted to do that. The problem was that the job market for a 13-year-old with no skills whatsoever, who looked like he was 8 years old, was pretty slim. And so my solution to become a DJ, even though no one would hire me, was to start my own DJ company, with the assumption that I could, of course, hire myself. And that was my first foray into entrepreneurship. I spent the next couple of years in high school building this DJ company. Terrible business model. We rented out our equipment at about $200 a pop, and we charged clients about $100 a pop. You can figure out the profit margin there wasn't very good. But I fell in love with entrepreneurship. A couple years later, I was 17 years old, and I was an undergrad student at McGill University. And my parents, unfortunately, had gone through some very serious financial hardship, and I needed to support myself. And after trying my hand at a couple different jobs, I realized that wasn't going to cut it. That if I wanted to support myself, and I wanted to concurrently get an education, I had to build a company. And after trying my hand at a bunch of different things that didn't work at all, I met a few students in my classes who were on student council at McGill University. And they advised me that McGill spent about $25,000 per semester buying t-shirts to give out to the different faculties, different students in each faculty. And without giving it any further thought, I thought that I could do that. I bought a screen printing machine, and I started selling t-shirts to universities across Canada. And rather than spending my 4 years of undergrad studying and really learning economics, which is what I was there for, I spent my 4 years of undergrad building this really great t-shirt business. When I was 21, a mentor had recommended that in order to become a better entrepreneur, I may consider law school. So I did that. I moved to Ottawa and started law school at the University of Ottawa in 2005. And at the time, it dawned on me that t-shirt business that I had built in undergrad was not going to sustain law school. Because that t-shirt business was predicated on my going to meets with student councils face to face. And because I looked like them, talked like them, and acted like them, they were much more ready to give me the contract rather than some big company like Gildan or American Apparel. And unlike undergrad in law school, I wasn't able to skip class and work. In law school, if you don't show up, you fail, and that would have been really bad. Around the same time, when I moved to Ottawa, I had no friends or family there. I began asking people if they knew of other like-minded entrepreneurs in Ottawa that I can meet with. I was looking to form a peer group. And I ended up going and meeting a bunch of entrepreneurs at a local coffee shop called Bridgehead. And this group of entrepreneurs, they met every single Friday night. And they exchanged war stories and they shared best practices. These people became my tribe in Ottawa. These were my guys. And one of those people was this brilliant programmer named Toby. Now, despite the fact that Toby and I were polar opposites, we had this shared ambition. We both wanted to change things, do big things, make no small plans. At the time, Toby had just wrote this piece of software to sell snowboards online. Back in 2005, there were two ways to sell a product on the internet. One way was to give some big software company $1 million and they would build it for you. The other way was to sell it on a marketplace like eBay or Etsy or Amazon. And although that was inexpensive and affordable, it didn't really allow you to build a scalable long-term business of your own. And because those options were just not acceptable to Toby, he wrote this piece of software to sell these snowboards. That's around the time where I met him. And I told him that I'm looking to take my t-shirt business from a wholesale, face-to-face, labor-intensive business to more of a virtual one and move into retail. And I became one of what is now Shopify's first customers. And I spent the next 3 or 4 years of my law degree and my MBA studying, but also building this little t-shirt business called Smoofer. After I finished law school, as some of you know, you have to do something called articles for 10 months. That's how you get called to the Ontario bar. And I articled at a really great law firm here in Toronto. And although the law firm was great and the people I worked with were great, I hated it. It was the worst year of my entire life. Unlike entrepreneurship, which was all about merit and a meritocracy, where the best ideas rise to the top, law firms tended to be more about legacy. It was how many years have you been there? And that's going to define the type of work that you do. And so in 2009, I decided there's no way that I'm going to be doing my life's work in law. And what I really would love to do is help these guys in Ottawa build Shopify from a small little company out of a coffee shop into what I believed could be a company that changes retail around the world. And over the last 7 years or so, myself and Toby and these brilliant people we work with at Shopify have helped more than 240,000 retailers in 150 countries build online stores. And those retailers, who are small businesses, they've sold about $10 billion on Shopify. Today we have about 1,200 employees across 4 Canadian cities. As some of you know, we recently went public about 12 months ago. And really what we're trying to do with Shopify is we want to make commerce better for everyone. We want to give small businesses the same tools that traditionally only the largest of businesses were able to afford, and allow them to build their own great companies. So while things have been exciting, we've been in the news a little bit lately, in many ways, I think Shopify is just getting started. And so I'm really excited about the journey. I feel very fortunate to be doing my life's work at this stage of my life. But at my core, at my real core, I'm an entrepreneur. So that's a bit about my story, and I guess we can go into some chat. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Harley. And thanks to everyone here for attending this session. How'd that feel when all those hands went up?
Pretty amazing, pretty amazing. I remember a time where no one knew who we were, no one really cared who we were. And it's funny, it feels a little bit like we're this overnight success story that took a decade. And it's interesting, right? When you're in the early stages of building a company, as many of you know, things like raising money and hiring great people and convincing a landlord to give you office space, those are really difficult things. And as the company grows, luckily those challenges are no longer an issue, but you have all these new challenges, which hopefully we'll get to talk to today.
So we'll talk for about 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll turn it over to the audience to see what they've got.
Sure, that's great.
For you. So I want to talk first a bit about culture, because culture is really important for companies large and small, but it tends to change as companies go from small to large. So tell us a little bit about the culture you try to have at Shopify.
Sure. So let me start by saying what culture is not. I believe wholeheartedly that most people assume that culture is putting a picture of an eagle up on the wall that says leadership underneath, and that's what they call culture. And I don't think that's what culture is. I don't think a set of mottos or a set of taglines is what culture is. I think we believe at Shopify what culture is what people are doing when no one is watching. What happens to your staff and your team when they're left to their own devices? So that's what I really think culture is first and foremost. In terms of the culture that we're trying to create and develop and curate at Shopify, we want a culture of people that feel like they're owners of the business themselves, right? And it's tough to do that with 1,200 people, but that's one of our ambitions. We want a culture where people are thinking about the long term, which gets a little bit more difficult when you're being judged on a quarter-to-quarter basis by Wall Street, but that's really what we're trying to do. And we're trying to create a culture where people can get shit done, where there isn't roadblocks. We want a culture that is highly aligned but loosely coupled, highly aligned where everyone understands what the vision is, but people are free to act and run on their own and free to make mistakes. So I know those are some buzz terms and some mottos, but those terms are really how we define our culture at Shopify, and the way that it manifests itself is what people do when no one's watching.
So that's easier, the long-term mentality, the thinking like an owner. That's easier when you're a small group. Most of them are owners, the founders of the company and the first people brought in. But how do you maintain that when you get to be 1,000? You guys are on your way to 2,000 people and beyond, probably. What do you do to keep the culture alive?
So one mistake that I think we made, that I think a lot of companies make, is that so we would love if the entire company was in one room. And if that can't happen, we'd love them to be on one floor. If that can't happen, we'd love it to be in one building. If that can't happen, the same city. If that can't happen, at least the same province or time zone. So we would love everyone to be in one room, but at 1,200 people, that just doesn't happen. So as we began to expand and open new offices, Toronto was our second one, Montreal third, and Waterloo is our newest one, our fourth office. I think we made a mistake by trying to force Ottawa's culture on those other cities. We thought we had it right in Ottawa, and so we were trying to impose our culture in all the different offices. That was a huge mistake. What we've instead have done, we've changed our minds on this, is now we let each office develop their own culture, and we sort of embrace multiculturalism between the different offices. So allowing each office, and frankly each team within each office, to have their own unique culture, that's one way you do that. Another way that you maintain culture with a lot of people is you need to default to open. Most people assume that transparency means a team email once a year, once a month. That's not transparency. We try to default to open by doing things like every Friday we do an Ask Me Anything, where the entire company can ask anyone, usually the executive team, any question they want, anonymously, or they can put their name to it. And other employees and other staff members will upvote and downvote those questions, and the best questions will get to the top. We default to open by really allowing people to understand what we're thinking about, but to sort of give them a bit of a sense of what our roadmap is and what keeps us up at night. I think transparency and being really candid with your team, that allows you to scale culture. But it's tough.
You admit when you've screwed up in those sessions?
I think you have to. Yeah, absolutely. I think there's we put out a lot of products at Shopify. Some you've heard of, like our core products. Others you probably never even caught because we put it out there and the public's reaction wasn't there. We didn't find product market fit, and so we decided to scrap that project. But I think that failure, in many ways gave us a lot of great insight for the next project. And so we've tried to create an environment where people feel really safe to fail, and where people don't have to ask for permission. They ask for forgiveness.
So when we were talking outside beforehand, you said something interesting, which is that creativity is more important than capital. Tell us what you mean by that.
So it's going to get really meta for a second. So my grandfather came to Canada in 1956, Hungarian Revolution. Canada let in 40,000 Hungarian immigrants. And my grandfather came and he opened a little farmer's market on the Jean Talon market in Montreal. For him to start that little business, even though it was a tiny little egg stand in a tiny little market, there was one ingredient. It was capital. He needed money. 20 years later, my dad started a furrier company in Montreal, in Chapinel, the Montreal Garment District. And even though he knew a little bit of fashion, he needed one ingredient, which was capital. I believe throughout the entirety of commerce in our world, capital was the main ingredient. You needed money to start a business. And I think something happened in the last 10 years or so where no longer is capital the most important thing. I think that if you want to get your product into the hands of millions of people around the world, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, you would have to go to Best Buy or Walmart, and you would have to convince a retail buyer to put your product on their shelves, and they would distribute it for you because they had stores in all these different cities. But now the internet gives you distribution to get in front of anyone all over the world. Today, if you want to raise some money just to kind of work on a prototype, you can go to Kickstarter, or you can go to one of these crowdfunding platforms. If you want to create a prototype, you can use a 3D printing machine. You don't have to go to China and have some expensive CAD design created. I think the barriers to starting a business, whether it's capital or it's connections, have all been reduced. It's now much easier to do those things. And I think now the people that I see succeeding most are the ones that are hyper creative. They're resourceful, even though they may not have resources. I think they're really passionate about what they're doing. But I think the days of random people taking some money and starting a company to sell widgets, and I say widgets in that they don't even care what they're selling, is long gone. I think today the companies that I'm seeing that are most successful, they're creative, they're resourceful, and they have a deep passion about what they're delivering to customers. But I don't think capital is nearly as important as it used to be.
So tell us, you guys do something called Hack Days. So that's something that is a creativity-based idea. Why don't you tell the audience what that is and why it's important?
So Hack Days is something that happens once a quarter, and for those business owners in the room, I know there's many of you, I encourage you to think maybe of your own iteration of this because it's incredibly valuable if done right. Once a quarter, for 2 days, the entire company shuts down. Support stays up because we still need to support our customers. So if you have a problem with your Shopify store, you can still call support. But other than support, the entire company stops doing their day jobs. And what they have to do is, starts Thursday morning and goes till Friday night. They have to get into teams with people they don't typically work with, get together. They have to come up with an idea. And they have to work on that idea all day Thursday and all day Friday. At the end of the day Friday, they have to demo that idea to the entire company. And then as a company, as a whole, we pick the ideas we think have the most legs, and Monday morning we start working on those ideas. The reason that Hack Days is important is not because of the ideas that come out of Hack Days that get commercialized. It's because for 48 hours once a quarter, the entire company can do anything they want. They can think big. Most people do things related to the business and commerce. Our Montreal team a couple months ago created a bartender where you just speak to the bartender, you say, I want a gin and tonic, and it automatically makes it for you. It's pretty cool. Someone else souped up a go-kart for a go-kart track. Pretty cool. But for the most part, it's this great refresh in terms of creativity. And some of the best ideas that have come out of our company have indirectly come out of Hack Days. And you may say, well, are you not losing productivity? Your salespeople aren't selling. I don't believe that at all. I think that the way people come back the following Monday after Hack Days is well worth the ROI of taking 2 days to work on something different than your day job.
Give us an example of something that came out of that process that you use in the business today.
So one of the things we realized a couple Hack Days ago is that a big chunk of the packages that are delivered from our stores to their customers, so from the merchants to the end consumers, is within a 15 or 20 kilometer radius. That was a really interesting insight. And so for Hack Days, we mocked up what it would look like if we were to start using local delivery companies, couriers in fact, rather than FedEx and UPS and Canada Post to deliver those packages. And that was a really good idea. Everyone agreed to it. And a couple months later, we announced a partnership with Uber Rush, where Uber Rush in key cities is now delivering packages from merchants to consumers. So if you're in Manhattan, you buy a pair of shoes from Kith, a killer shoe store, Uber Rush on a bicycle will deliver the shoes right to you within an hour. That came out of Hack Days. It sounds obvious, but someone had to look at the data, someone had to think about how that manifests itself into a commercializable product, and that came out of Hack Days. So it also encourages kind of this bottom-up kind of thinking. I think in most companies, the ideas come from the top. It does not at Shopify. I mean, I view my role at Shopify, and I think the executive's role is to develop our people, is to be advisors. But the people running our company are the people that are the directors and the managers and the VPs, and I don't need the executives run the company anymore. And I think it's a good thing.
So creativity is more important than capital, but you still need capital, and many of these businesses out here, they're looking for capital or will need it as they grow. So you've had a long journey through private markets and now the public market. Tell us a bit about what you learned in that, what the pitfalls and great things about raising investor capital.
When you need money, no one really wants to give it to you. When you don't need money, everyone wants to give it to you. I mean, I wish that wasn't true. It is. There's someone in the room, and I'm not going to embarrass him, but there's someone in the room who I refer to as the godfather of Shopify. And this man who's sitting amongst you right now, and again, I won't embarrass him because he's shy. Before anyone else in the entire world believed in us, this man did. Before anyone else in the world was willing to write us a check, this man did. And as you can imagine, he's probably done pretty well in his initial investment to Shopify. You can see the guy smiling, the biggest in the room, and maybe him. I think one key was to find people very early on that truly believed in our vision, and it does create a bit of a domino effect. You got to find that one person, those two people that believe in you. So that's the first thing I would say is when you're really getting started, you really need to find someone that gets it, and build a trust battery with them. We use this concept of the trust battery for most of our staff at Shopify, but the trust battery analogy works really well also for investors. I think everyone starts, at least with me, because I'm an optimist, about 60 or 70% in terms of the trust battery. And it's my job to get that trust battery to 100%, because once I do, I feel like we have a much better relationship. Autonomy happens, trust happens. So I think number one, find someone that believes in what you're doing and make him the godfather or the godmother of your company. Second thing that happened, for us at least, was prior to 2010, there was a section of the Canadian tax code, section of the Canadian budget called Section 116 that effectively made it prohibitive for U.S. investors to invest in Canadian companies. It forced U.S. investors, the LPs of those funds, to file Canadian tax returns, which was really, really bad. And around June 2010, that section was rescinded and was no longer the case. And so once that happened, we didn't go to some big fund or some iconic VC. Turned out we did, but that wasn't the intention. We found a partner at a particular VC firm in New York City. It was Jeremy Levine at Bessemer Venture Partners in New York City, who we felt really understood what we were trying to build. He knew commerce, he understood technology, and we felt that he would be a great person to have on our board. And so even from an early stage, we needed his money, but frankly, we wanted to raise smart money, people that really can help us scale. So we raised $7 million in 2010, primarily led by Bessemer. 2011, we raised $15 million. We brought in Georgian partners as well. And then we raised our largest round in 2014, a $100 million round. And Omer's Ventures here in Toronto, as well as Insight, led those rounds. And it got easier, but certainly my biggest aha moment out of the whole investor pitch experience was they want to make sure you have a really good handle on your business. And if you're going to go in there and you really don't understand the metrics behind your company, and you don't understand how to put $1 in here to make $1.80 here, they're not going to fund you. You can get lucky and raise money in a bubble from an investor who just has a ton of money to deploy, and if you do that, good for you. For most of us, for the rest of us, it doesn't happen like that. But fundraising was, I think, a lot more difficult in Canada, and frankly, I think it's actually gotten way better in the last couple of years here. There's some really great funds, VCs in Canada, that are looking for great companies and good founders.
And now you're public.
And now we're public.
Now it's all out there.
Now it is. Yeah.
No hiding anything.
Yeah.
So how's that changed how you manage the company?
I can say this, the roadshow, which is the 2 or 3 week period before you go public, where you go to like 8 cities a day, that was probably the coolest 2 or 3 weeks of my life. Toby probably doesn't feel the same way about those 2 or 3 weeks. He's much more introverted than I am, but I loved it. I got a chance to meet some of the biggest funds, some of the best investors in the world, and talk about my favorite topic, which is Shopify. Ringing the bell was incredibly emotional, and for any entrepreneur, it's sort of, that's sort of the pinnacle, right? But for us, going public was sort of, it was sort of like graduation. Like we just moved from the minor leagues to the major leagues. In many ways, as I said on stage, we're just getting started. Couple things that kind of happened. We have a new offering called Shopify Plus, which really focuses on larger brands. So going public actually helped a lot with that. The day we went public on the New York Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange set up a shop on Shopify, which is kind of cool. So now you can buy your bull and bear cufflinks from the New York Stock Exchange shop, as if everyone wants those. We also were able to start hiring better talent, I think, or more senior talent. There are some people out there that would prefer to work for a public company than work for a startup, and so being public certainly helped in that capacity. But we were very careful not to bring in any of that short-term, quarter-to-quarter focus. And I think we've done a good job of sheltering most of the company from those earnings calls and from some of that pressure to be short-term focused. And I think we've done a good job of that. But it's been an incredible experience, and I'm completely out of my comfort zone, and I think most of us are. Getting more comfortable, but still uncomfortable, and I think that's a really good place, personally, for me to be in the business, for me to be really comfortable with being uncomfortable.
So that may be a good moment to talk a bit about hiring, because it's hard to do, right? But it's harder when you are going to 1,100 and you and your immediate team kind of lose control of the process. So how do you make sure that you're making good hires when you get to a size where you can't really keep an eye on everything that's being done?
So one thing that I think is worth noting, so we hire for potential, not for experience. Very clear. We hire for potential, not for experience. So for us, one of the tactics that we find really valuable in the hiring process is the life story question. Right? Some of you may use it, some of you may not use it. We find it's really valuable because what we're looking for is we're looking for the person that got really deep into something. There was a problem, whether they were in school, they didn't get into school, they were looking for a job, but someone that looked at a problem and got so deep into it and really understood the entirety of the problem set. We're looking for people that didn't play on the tennis team, but actually started the tennis team because there wasn't one. We want the person that didn't just work for a charity, but maybe she saw a charity or a cause that wasn't getting funding, and she started her own charity. We're looking for these founder-type mentalities, and we found that the life story interview process works really well. The second thing that has been really helpful in terms of hiring, and by the way, now it's easier for us to hire by the show of hands, I know that a lot more people know about Shopify. But in the early days, someone who's coming from IBM, who's been 20 or 25 years at Big Blue, to come to a startup with 20 or 30 people, that is really difficult. And so, again, we are seeing more senior people that are now coming to the company. The other thing that I think is really important is we want people that will join us to do their life's work, which is very different than just coming and having a job. And so, as part of that process, we make a commitment to them. Not only will we give you a great place to work with challenging work, and obviously an ability to make good money and support your life and the life of your family, but we will also invest in you in terms of talent acceleration. So we have 8 full-time coaches at Shopify whose job it is to coach anyone who manages more than 2 people. As some of you know, some of us are born leaders, and that's really cool. But nobody is born a good manager. And anyone that says they're born a good manager is lying. Management is the most difficult thing in the entire world, and I'm 5% on my journey to being a great manager. So I think we recruit people for potential. We ensure that they know that we're going to invest in them long term. And we sort of use a policy of radical candor and radical transparency, whereby if it's working, then that's great. We'll give them more responsibilities. And if it's not, we're going to have that discussion as well. Most technology companies fall into this trap where the best engineer or the best designer tends to eventually become a manager. But not every designer, not every developer, engineer wants to be a manager. And most companies catapult these people into those roles. And so we actually have 2 leadership tracks. You can either be a people manager or you can be a tech manager. And if all you want to do is write code or design products the rest of your life, and you don't want to manage people, that is perfectly okay. In almost every other company that I've come into contact with, that is not okay for them. And so we really do have 2 tracks of development at Shopify. I didn't answer your question, but I wanted to get that out, so I just went there.
No, that was a good answer. So speaking of people who just want to, write code and make the product, you have this. I don't know, maybe it's not a motto, but a kind of touchstone that revenue follows the product. So tell us a little bit about how that manifests itself at your company, and how do you keep it as you get big?
So I think our competitive advantage early on, when we were just getting up and running, we had a couple thousand merchants, was that we had incredible empathy that our competitors did not. So there were competitors in the market. Amazon had Amazon Web Store, which no longer exists. Yahoo had Yahoo stores, which no longer exist. We had some very big competitors that were far more capitalized and far more experienced than we were. But I think the reason that so many merchants and small businesses chose our product was because this was the product that we ourselves built, that we were looking for. And so the empathy that we came to the problem set with was so much greater than some McKinsey-type guy, sorry if there's any consultants in the room, but McKinsey-type consultant, assuming they knew what small businesses need. And as the company grew and time went on, we continually went back to that. How are we going to delight our merchants? How is the product going to get better and better? And sometimes we did that at the sacrifice of revenue. That's a lot easier before you have a CFO. When you hire a CFO, they want to know obviously where the revenue is, but the deal that we have with our CFO, and frankly the deal that we've had with all of our investors, and certainly when I was on the roadshow meeting with big funds, the Fidelities of the world and T. Rowe's of the world, one of the things we really talked about was the fact that we are going to focus on product, and we believe fundamentally, philosophically, that if we have the best product out there, revenue will follow. And we will find ways to commercialize, we'll find ways to find greater revenue opportunities, but ultimately, that's the best thing to do. And the best example I can give you is this. If you know how to use email, you can set up a store with Shopify in about under an hour. Make it really easy, very simple, very inexpensive. But if you were setting up a store on Shopify 2 years ago, and it was really easy, you're adding your products, there was this friction point, which was you needed to set up a payment gateway. You needed to get a merchant account from some big payment gateway. Which meant that the experience for a small business, no matter how good of a product we had, wasn't the best it could have been. And so I think about 2 years ago, we launched Shopify Payments, not because we wanted to make money, but actually because we want to create less friction in building a store. And so when you sign up for Shopify today, you are automatically provisioned with a merchant account. And we will accept money for you right away. You don't have to wait any amount of time. That is a really good product decision first and foremost. It turns out it's also a really good revenue decision because now we're able to take a cut off off the GMV, off the gross merchandise value or volume. So I think if we would have started with the revenue piece, we would have made a bad decision there. And same thing, we just launched Shopify Shipping a couple weeks ago. Same thing. We believe we can do a really good job of aggregating all these shipping companies together. We think most people fundamentally either want to ship fast or ship cheap. They are not necessarily loyal to Big Brown or FedEx. It's utility for them. And ultimately, we think we can do a better job of aggregating it. And eventually, we'll figure out how the revenue will flow from that. But fundamentally, it's a product decision.
So we're going to go to the audience in just a moment, but one last question. Tell us about a mistake that you made and what you learned from it.
So I'll tell you two. I'll tell you one that's a personal mistake, and then I'll tell you one for the company. On a personal level, when I first started Shopify, I was in my 20s. I was an entrepreneur when I was 13. I kind of thought I knew everything, like most 20-somethings do. And I think I had a problem hiring people better than me. I felt that if I was going to hire people better than me, the value that I was going to create for the company wasn't going to be nearly as apparent or obvious. And I think I made some really bad decisions in the early days, and it took mentors of mine to coaches of mine to kind of work through that. Today, no matter who it is, no matter what role it is, I hire people better, faster, smarter than I am. And so I think hiring is super important to your point earlier, and I made a mistake with that. I wasn't good enough. I wasn't good enough at that. I also didn't ask for help as much as I probably could. The day that I became COO, I asked my board for the top 4 COOs in the world, and I called them up and I said, I need help. What do you guys know that I don't know? What have you learned? And so I'm spending a lot more time now trying to ask questions. I wasn't good at that in the early days, and I think that had a lot to do with my own insecurity and my own ego. So that was me kind of having to get over myself. From a company perspective, again, most of the mistakes we make from a company perspective, we kind of look at them as failure is the successful identification of something new, something insightful. But in the early days, the way we were working, our revenue model just didn't make sense. We were charging a 4% fee for all transactions. So if you didn't sell anything, you didn't pay us any money. And if you sold a lot, no one really wanted to give us 4%. So we've moved now to a subscription model with a transaction fee, so $29 a month, recurring revenue, monthly recurring revenue. I think the revenue model we had in the early days just wasn't the right one, and we just had to A/B test it over and over again to find the right fit. And what else? I'm trying to think of some big mistakes. I mean, there's so many of them, so I'm having a tough time paying down on one. I think we've also made hires that on paper look to be the best hire ever. She was this, he was this, like God's gift to business. Some Silicon Valley hero, someone that wrote books and had books written about them. And it wasn't a fit. And so no matter how experienced and how smart she was or how smart he was, it didn't fit in well. That was a big mistake. And I think that we would prefer to miss out on a great hire than hire the wrong person. And I think most companies do the opposite. But I think the wrong person can completely poison the culture of your business.
So we'll take questions from the audience. Are there microphones or? Okay. So there are microphones in the back. If you raise your hand, we'll
get you a
mic, and we can take this first one here.
I'm a new customer actually of Shopify.
Oh, great.
And referred already to Athletic, so I'm not really technical.
Who referred you to that? Oh, okay, this young lady. Okay. She's calling you old, right?
No, we're in a hyper-low tech business. We live in artificial the wired in the model tech. But when we took a reasonably good website and we had to put it on Shopify, we lost a lot of that creativity to get basic functionality on Shopify. And for me, looking at the site, I don't see where it says we can help you redesign a better website. How do you?
So we don't do that. So Shopify is do-it-yourself. The idea is that we want to make it as easy as possible that anyone can do that. Now, for larger brands that use Shopify, companies like Tesla or Kanye West or Kylie Jenner or Budweiser, or potentially you, someone that wants something very, very specific, what we have is we have a community of experts all over the world. And if you go to experts.shopify.com, these are 500 of the top web agencies and designers who have all done many, many builds on Shopify and are the most experienced. So most people, just to be clear, use Shopify and build it on their own. But for some people that want something specific, or some people that may self-identify as a Luddite, they may want to use one of our partners, one of our experts. And that's the way we do it. We've created a platform rather than doing it all ourselves. We're not a services business. The reason also it's really important for those of you thinking about doing a sort of a platform play or a network play is that as we sit here right now, there are thousands of people all over the world that are building online stores for their own clients using the Shopify software. And we've just found it to be a better model. But if you need some help, I'm pretty good at this stuff. I can help you myself. Yeah.
Other questions? This gentleman right here.
Why did you get 4% model?
Yeah. So the question is, why did the 4% model, transaction fee model, didn't work initially? I think because for a small business when they're getting set up, it may take them a couple months to make money. During that time, I make no money, even though I have to support them and I have to encourage them and I have to provide them with all this great value. Once they do get set up and they start selling at scale, in some cases, if you're not manufacturing your own product and you're a reseller of someone else's product, 4% may be the difference between hitting EBITDA and not hitting EBITDA. So for us, that just, people are used to paying 2% because many people pay 2% on credit card fees or 2.9%. But we found that 4% wasn't enough when you're getting started. We didn't make any money. And then when people just hit scale, they didn't want to give up 4% to us. Whereas now, $29 a month, pay us as soon as you get started. And as you grow, you may select higher end plans and we may make some money through our payment side or a small transaction fee. But generally, the pricing model we think is better. And that doesn't mean that it's the best model now. We may eventually change it again. But that's the reason why the 4% didn't work. Right now we have a hybrid model, which is a $29 a month plan plus a 2% transaction fee. And if you're Tesla and you want to sell millions of dollars of car parts on Shopify, you don't want to pay the transaction fee. Shopify Plus is just a flat fee of a couple $1,000. Yeah.
There was a question at this table here.
You touched a lot upon having mentors or having to go to councils when you were actually starting up or getting into that entrepreneurship. Tell us a little bit about where do people like yourself go, or what would you recommend to people who are actually starting up businesses to go to those kind of mentors, or where should they be looking for those?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. I think it's much easier today. Like BetaKit didn't exist in 2010, and these blogs and all these resources. Mars was kind of just getting set up here in Toronto. What's really great is there's probably more startup technology meetups in Toronto than I could even count on one hand. And so I think it's easier to find these meetups and to find your tribe if you're getting set up. But that being said, some of the most valuable mentors and people that I take advice from are not necessarily in tech. They're people that I just really respect and they're great mentors. When I was in law school, I was sitting in securities law class, and I read about a guy named Jerry Schwartz from Onyx, and I was like, this is a really interesting guy. Like, maybe he'll talk to me. And so I guessed his email, like first letter last name, first letter dot last name at onyx.ca.com, whatever. And eventually I got an email back from Jerry Schwartz, and we had a really great conversation. But I've done that 150,000 times. I've done that so many times in my life. And some of those relationships have turned into very strong mentors. Joe Mimran, for example, is from Joe Fresh and Club Monaco. I mean, he's someone that I can call on every single month, and we have a scheduled call, and we can talk about things that I'm going through. And I use him a lot for things like culture and branding, and he really gets that stuff. You'd be surprised how many people will get back to you. The problem is that after you send out 100 emails to people that you want to connect with and no one writes you back, it may be 101 that writes you back. But most people, they get discouraged, and so the appetite they have for more and more emails as time goes on, when rejection keeps happening, piling up, actually diminishes. And so if you can persevere through those 100 rejections, that 101 may be the person that you can connect with. I think that's a great way to do it. And the other thing is just figure out where entrepreneurs are hanging out. I still hang out at hackathons all the time because I think that's one of the best places for me to hire people from. So if I'm in Toronto and there's a hackathon happening at Ryerson at DMZ, I'm going to stop by. Selfishly, I'm interested. Even more selfishly, I want to hire the best people from there. So I think it's easier, but you just kind of need to look around a little bit. Yeah, no problem.
Other questions? There's one right back there.
Yeah. I don't like to use mics. Can you hear me from here? Or should I use the mic?
I mean, there's a mic sitting right next to you in the office.
I prefer not to, but
You got a great voice.
Question.
It's great.
Thank you. Question for you, Harley, about young entrepreneurs without much experience. Now, you're talking about passion and being passionate about your businesses, and I'm sure that you're passionate about every single one of your businesses that you've had, even the ones that weren't so great and the ones that failed. How do you know, like, at which point to stop the passion and sort of look around and realize that you're making mistakes and to
Change
your
courses.
ways? Yeah, change courses. Like, how have you done that in the past?
I'm going to answer that question, but I just had a bit of a thought about that question about what's my biggest mistake. Another big mistake that I made was I thought for a very long time I was becoming a jack of all trades and a master of none. I had my hands in so many different places. I was a law student, I was writing a bit, I had a couple different companies. I was trying to be everything to everyone. And that was not good. Today, I'm squarely focused on our business. I'm hyper-focused on that. I want to be a master of one thing and one thing only. But that being said, I think the one thing that the jack of all trades philosophy allowed me to do was I was able to throw some shit at the wall and see what sticks. I was able to try a bunch of businesses and see which one resonates most with me. Ironically, it's not always going to be the business that you're most passionate about that ends up working. But the good news is that once you figure out something that's working, once you find product market fit, you can tweak it so that you're able to combine something that you're passionate about with something that actually is a real business. But I actually believe that in 2016, the cost of failure is trending pretty damn close to zero, right? Like, you can start a business right now with Shopify, you can do a Kickstarter campaign or do a 3D printing prototype, you can get your product in the hands of millions of people, all for $29. And if it works, you can scale it. And I've watched companies that started with us and they were very small that are today doing $100 million on Shopify of sales. And so I think that the fact that the cost of failure is trending towards zero is wonderful for that question because you can try so many different things. The challenge, though, is that if you can do it, it means a lot more people can do it. And so there's way more noise in the market. There are, type in, sunglass company or sunglass retailer on Google, you're going to see a million sunglass companies. And so it's going to be more difficult to rise to the top and differentiate yourself. And there are companies that have done a great job. Warby Parker has done a phenomenal job in that particular industry. But I think that you kind of need to throw some stuff around and see what sticks. And so I think there's a time to be a jack of all trades. And then once you figure it out, you need to be hyper-focused on being a master of one thing. That's what I would say. Yeah. I'd also say something that is maybe worthwhile. And I'm not sure if you caught this, but my story about meeting Toby, it should not be underestimated how different him and I are. We are polar opposites. And he isn't someone that that I grew up with, and he isn't someone that I probably would have hung out with earlier on in life. We just have very different interests. One of my mistakes, this is another list, you guys can make your list of all my mistakes today, was that most of my partners in my previous businesses were all like me. They looked like me, they acted like me, we kind of hung out, like we liked the same things. So we all had the same skill sets, which is stupid. Now, everyone that if you look at the Shopify executive team, we're like the Avengers. Like, none of us are the same. Like, one guy's the Hulk and one guy is, we're all different. We all have different, superpowers. And on our own, we're pretty good, but when we get together, we're a monster. I think that's really important.
Good questions.
Hey there. I also don't like to use mics, so I hear you on that. But my question was, you've managed to grow this massive business now and scale it, but originally you were a startup. So what were some of the major decisions that you made that allowed you to make that jump that really stand out to you, that if you didn't get them right, you'd still be a startup right now?
It's a really good question. So I think we're still a startup now just because the way we operate, the way, like, if you walk into our offices, you feel like you're in a startup. What does that mean? It doesn't just mean that we have beautiful offices. It means that people are free to be really creative, and if someone works better at certain hours of the day, that's when they should work. And if someone wants to work from the roof, that's where they should work from. And it's just, the startup culture, I think, is a little bit misunderstood. I think most startups are scrappy, and I think Shopify is still scrappy. We're not sloppy, but we're very much scrappy still. We believe in the idea of MVP, minimum viable products, right? We want to build something really good, put it out there, get feedback, and iterate until it's really great. So I think we still have that. I think the bigger transition happened when we moved from being what I would call a lifestyle business to a growth business. And that was really important. And really the trigger for that was raising outside money. When we raised outside money, it was clear to us that we were eventually going to have to return that money to these investors, either through an acquisition or through an IPO, or we go to business. And there's only really 3 ways to go at that point. And so when we took that first dollar of outside funding, after sort of friends and family and some of the, some of those guys, it was clear to us, okay, we are not a lifestyle business. This is a business that, at those days, we used to say, imagine one day we can be a $100 million business, and now we're a $2 or $3 billion business, which is amazing. But that, I think, was a much bigger transition. I don't feel like we ever said we're no longer a startup anymore. I feel like we're trying to maintain that sort of culture and mentality today.
Good time for one more question. There's a gentleman right there.
Harley, you spoke extensively about humility and charging the trust battery, which is a beautiful metaphor. I'm just wondering, thank you.
I'm just wondering what advice you would give to a business owner who wants to communicate empathy, trust, collaboration to employees and clients, and still be perceived as a bottom line, effective, profitable business owner.
I think there's a couple good hacks for that. I think there's a couple good tricks for that. One trick is go back to your team today and do an AMA, an anonymous AMA. Allow anyone in the entire company to ask you questions in front of all your staff anonymously. Now, the reason that's important is because the first 5 or 6 questions, that's going to be a pressure valve for you. That's going to be what the zeitgeist of your team is thinking about. After that, you may get other questions about random things like, what do you do for fun if they don't really know you that well. But the first 5 or 6 questions that will come out of an AMA and ask me anything, specifically when it's done anonymously, where your staff is made to feel very free, that's going to be the release of the pressure valve of what's on their minds. And if you get into the habit and the cadence of doing that over and over again, eventually they will feel that they understand what's in your head. I also think that one way that could be important is overshare. So every quarter we have a board meeting at Shopify, like most companies do, and the executive team, we write a letter to the board. It's a 10-page document, and it's everything that we're thinking about in the future, but also what happened last quarter. We share that entire letter without any redaction, without any modifications with the entire company. We want them to know what is being said in board meetings. I think once you start doing those things, I don't think it happens right away, but very quickly you will realize that, number one, your staff believes that they understand what's on your mind and they feel like they're a part of the decision-making process. And through those AMAs also, they're going to call you out on things. They're going to call you out on, you give us trouble about not being in at 9 a.m., but you're never in at 9 a.m. You're always in at 12 after you golf, or whatever the case may be. I think stuff like that really, really does matter. I don't think that stuff is just stuff you do and you forget about. I think if you do it consistently, that's where things get really, really great. I also think, one way that I find really helpful to ensure that they understand that we're all on the same team is often I just go and randomly will sit with different teams across the company for the entire day, and that's where I'll work from. And I find just kind of listening into what other people are thinking about and talking about and listening to other people's phone calls. I'm not there to judge. I'm not there to give them a score afterwards of how they did. I'm just there to be helpful, and often I can turn around and say, I didn't even know we do that. Like, I'm learning stuff from them as well. I think that's really important. And I think also, I mentioned coaching earlier. Coaching is this weird thing. I've been seeing Coach for 5 years, and in the last 2 years, I've been talking more and more about it. And the more I talk about it, the more people will come to me and say, I also see a coach. So that makes me think that a lot of people are seeing coaches, but they're embarrassed to say they're seeing a coach. I think it's a wonderful thing. So I talk about my own development as a manager with my team. That there's stuff I'm not good at. I probably over micromanage, and it's because my lizard brain is that of an entrepreneur. I'm so used to doing everything myself, but now I can't do everything myself, and I have to trust but verify that other people are doing it, and usually do it better than I do. So those are some hacks, I think.
Yeah. Thank you to the audience for fantastic questions, and thank you. That was an inspiration.